Folks, let's talk about SCOTUS, okay? The Supreme Court of the United States of America, right? And, well, today has been an interesting day in the history of SCOTUS, okay? So, a lot of people are making a big deal because SCOTUS heard arguments today on the birthright citizenship case. Essentially, the government wants to say, in certain cases, you are not a US citizen if you were born here, you know, which is insane, right? And is that citizenship a real? No, that was a real thing, Vox Syndicate. That was real. Um, but SCOTUS was hearing the birthright citizenship case today, except today's arguments were not really about the merits of birthright citizenship or the lack of merits to the government's arguments. Today, the arguments really centered around the idea that federal judges can issue nationwide injunctions. Essentially, an injunction just is like we are going to put a pause on the implementation of this new policy or law until we decide the constitutionality of said law, policy, etc. Right? And so the Trump administration has been stymied by a number of lower courts basically saying, hey, you can't do that. Okay. And then the Trump administration appeals the injunction and appeals the injunction and appeals the injunction, losing their way up to the Supreme Court. And that case goes in front of the SCOTUS, and SCOTUS has typically sided with the lower courts. However, unfortunately, today, the conservative justices seem to be not entirely won over to the idea that, lower courts have the ability to issue injunctions. And that's a really, really scary thing, right? Okay, that's really, really scary. Because the entire premise of judges is to rule on the legality or constitutionality of different aspects of the law. And the reason federal judges have the ability to constrain the federal government is so that the federal government cannot do essentially crimes and then just bog down someone in litigation or an affected group of people in litigation until that question becomes moot, which is what the Trump administration has been trying to do, right? So they're arguing, well, all of these injunctions are stopping us from, implementing what could be, constitutional. All of these injunctions that are stopping us from doing unconstitutional things might be stopping us hypothetically from doing constitutional things. And that's just not right. Right. And nothing was decided by the Supreme Court of the United States today. Not a single damn thing, right? Which is very frustrating because it's left a lot of people trying to read the tea leaves, trying to figure out where the different justices are going to land. What are they going to try and split it in the middle? And the reality is no one knows. And there are a lot of really scary headlines going around about this right now, okay? But no one knows what's going to happen here. And so the question in the title of the stream, is SCOTUS going to screw us? The answer might be yes. It might also be no. And so, yeah, of course there's never a ruling on the same day as oral arguments, but usually you can get a sense of where the justices are from their lines of questioning, argumentation, etc. And people who pay attention to these things, by and large, are kind of agreeing there's not a consensus on which way the court is likely to go. And so that's deeply worrying. And that's what makes a case like this that has a lot of people really scared even scarier, because it doesn't seem to have a definitive answer that will like allay people's fears. And so people are justifiably worried, because if the government here bars lower courts from issuing injunctions, essentially what happens, and what the Department of Justice argued before the Supreme Court today, is, hey, if you're an affected individual, or you can sue the government. You're by yourself can just sue the government for redress, or you can find like a class action group of people to sue the government for redress. And like, we'll get to it in like 5 or 6 years. But understand that like 5 or 6 years of like being bogged down fighting the immense resources of the federal government for one person or even a small group of people, like, if it is removing your citizenship, well, like, you're effectively barred from voting. You can't access government services. You are, like, there are a whole host of things that very tangibly harm you, right? And so that's a really scary possibility, because one of the things that a lot of the movement around immigration has been doing, right? At least as far as the government is concerned, they have been starting to, and there have been a lot of rumors, or not really rumors, but there's been some reporting on this in different localized news outlets, right? About ICE or Border Patrol targeting indigenous communities, right? And part of this birthright citizenship entire case would potentially invalidate the citizenship of like indigenous people. It would potentially have a whole host of knock-on effects that could hit people who are naturalized citizens, or people who are the children of immigrants. It could have potentially devastating and terrifying consequences, right? So people are justifiably worried about this. And my take on the entire day of arguments on what's been going on here is simply that we don't have enough info about where the judges are at. If I had to speculate, I know Neil Gorsuch is generally, oddly enough, fairly good on indigenous rights issues, despite the fact that he's, Neil Gorsuch. Roberts, I think, might go against this in order to like preserve the court's power, because essentially, if everything has to go up to SCOTUS for them to decide, they're not going to like that very much. Okay. And, obviously the liberals on the court are going to be against this, but then that leaves Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett. I think Amy Coney Barrett might vote along with the liberals. She's been doing that more and more lately. But it really is kind of like up in the air based on the comments today. Kavanaugh seemed pretty unconvinced by sane arguments, we'll say. Okay. So that's just kind of where we're at. And it's scary, but I want to give you guys just a little bit of like, it is scary, but don't let the headlines that are very, very scary get to you too much, because again, no one knows which way this court is going to go on these issues. All right. How many people currently fit the requirements for birthright citizens in America? But most, the overwhelming vast majority. SCOTUS didn't do ruling today. SCOTUS heard arguments today. The ruling should come down sometime in June. I think mid-June is like the expected window for their ruling on this particular case. But I just wanted to kind of let you guys know there's going to be a lot of people trying to read the tea leaves on this, and there's just not a ton to go on, unfortunately. And this is just one aspect of an overall very scary case. So that, like, today really added more importance on this. What is the birthright citizenship? So that's kind of where we're at, right? Arguments were made. I think that sane arguments may move the court. We'll see. It's also possible, and probably a very likely outcome, that the Supreme Court will issue some kind of set of guidelines under which lower courts can still issue national injunctions, but it might have that might have some limits placed on it, and I don't know what those might be, but that's kind of like maybe one of the more likely outcomes. But again, who can say? What color smoke do they announce the ruling with? I don't know. The color of law. So that's where we're at. Do you guys have any questions about this? Marocat, are you okay? Patrick Lucas, thank you for the gifted membership. I appreciate that. Do you guys have any questions on this? I'm looking to see if any of you are confused by what I laid out. No questions? I'm glad you understand, Malachi. I couldn't give less of a shit about Kid Rock's restaurant. On a scale of 1 to 10, how fucked are we? By today, the answer is question mark. You know, like, we don't have like a... We don't have a good read on how SCOTUS is going to go here. It's not great that they don't have a clear leaning against these arguments, but it's also not the end of the world because, frankly, SCOTUS is a super majority of fucking conservatives. So the fact that, like, we have a fighting chance at all is just an indicator of, like, how insane this administration is. Are we still in the cool zone? Absolutely. Are they afraid to answer? To answer what? Not gonna lie, it's really scary how fast things are changing, but I guess a question I have is, how do we move forward? Well, fundamentally, one of the things that we keep coming back to on all of these days that get a little bit scary, or get a lot scary, is essentially, hey, this doesn't change what we have to do, okay? Like, it doesn't fundamentally change our jobs of continuing to mobilize as many people as possible. It doesn't change our duty to keep telling other people about what's happening. It doesn't change our, like, mission to mobilize more and more people to get out into the streets. Because ultimately, the only answer to this type of tyranny is mass mobilization for peaceful protest. That is statistically our best way out of this. And so on June 14th, there is going to be a mass mobilization day all across this country. It's on Donald Trump's birthday. There's going to be a military parade that he's very, very proud of in Washington, D.C. But all across the country, our goal is to make all the other protests louder and more important in the media than his stupid ass parade. Okay? So June 14th, stop calling it Flag Day, call it No King's Day, baby. And I'm just going to throw this out there, okay? There's a website, www.nokings.org. And go there, and you can go and you can decide to host an event. You can find events near you. And every single time I look at this map, there's exponentially more events happening. But the entire point of this is, if you don't have a local event you can go to, make your own, okay? Make that petty bitches parade look like it's for a petty bitch. So go to that website, and I want to see each one of you out protesting that day. I want to hear how many people you brought to that protest. I want you to get as many people out there as possible. I'm Canadian. Can I make an event? I guess if you come here. So that's kind of our goal. And there are going to be more mass mobilization days after this one, right? But ultimately, we can't lose sight that even though these things are scary, what we have to do remains relatively simple and straightforward. And it is to increase political pressure on our elected officials more and more, to turn the screws, okay? And to turn those screws, you have to turn out, you have to get loud, and you have to call your elected representatives, okay? Do those 3 things and get other people to do those 3 things. So I guess that's 4 things, all right? Do those 4 things, all right? That's your job. That is the job of each and every one of us here in America. That is what I try to get you guys to do every single time I stream, because these are the main levers available to us right now. Okay? I was told that Jen Kuger and Anna Kasparian are going to get right-wingers to come to our side and they will save us all. It'll be a cold day in hell. I met with one of my city councilors today. She's old enough to have been in the city council in the 70s, and advised her that because segregation ended in her living memory, she has no excuse not to be anti-racist. It broke her a little. Good. I want No King's Day to be a national holiday. Well, historically, the way to get that is to get historic numbers of people into the streets. That's how we got May Day as a national holiday. So, I think that's an excellent way for us to end the segment. That is our job. Regardless of how all of this shakes out, we need to get angry, we need to get loud, we need to stay loud, and we need to keep turning up that pressure until we win. That is how we do this thing, and that is how fundamentally these social movements succeed. So let's push back authoritarianism together and maybe even have some fun doing it. Because you know what? What's a movement without dancing and singing? Huh?
Riverboat deck is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.